Welcome to Daily Drive for Tuesday, June 14th, 2026. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, Volkswagen weighs building China-developed models at underused German plants to preserve jobs. Toyota's Koji Sato wants Japan's 7 automakers to standardize commodity components to free resources for new technologies. And a new consumer survey by consulting firm McKinsey said that range anxiety is rapidly fading as a barrier to U.S. EV adoption with the introduction of bigger batteries. Plus, Automotive News Europe's Peter Sigal offers insight into Volkswagen's tough decisions.
Straight job cuts and straight factory closures were always going to be a tough sell. It may be the necessary medicine that Volkswagen needs to swallow, but I think the feeling is that if there are any other avenues to explore, and this is not from management's perspective, but from some of the other stakeholders, we should try everything else before we resort. Because, as you know, once you close an automotive factory, it's not opening again.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. In order to preserve jobs, Volkswagen is considering building China-developed models at underused German factories. CEO Oliver Blume first publicly raised the idea during VW's first quarter earnings call on April 30th, and it has gained momentum. It would be a strategic reversal that upends Volkswagen's regional product strategy. 3 broad scenarios are under discussion, according to people familiar with the matter. The internally preferred option is to build future vehicles based on Volkswagen's China scalable platform. Other options involve producing VW models originally developed for China and VW potentially manufacturing vehicles for Chinese partner XPeng in Germany. Toyota's Koji Sato believes that Japan's 7 automotive companies should cooperate on standardizing commodity components, from steel grades and plastics to wire harnesses and more. He says it will save time and money to channel into new technologies, advanced factories, and better productivity. In particular, Sato estimated standardizing wire harnesses alone could boost productivity tenfold. This plan is one of the most ambitious attempts yet to reshape a sprawling supply base spanning Toyota, Nissan, Honda, Mazda, Subaru, Mitsubishi, and Suzuki. It could potentially feed the car makers worldwide if expanded to cover swaths of components made by suppliers at home and abroad. A new consumer survey by consulting firm McKinsey said that range anxiety is becoming less of a barrier for U.S. EV adoption due to the introduction of bigger batteries that improve driving distance. Most new EVs have a range of 300 miles, and McKinsey said that battery capacity for electric vehicles sold in the U.S. increased by more than 50% compared with 2019. EV sales are recovering from a sharp drop following last year's repeal of the federal tax credit. Affordability remains a top concern for all vehicles, so McKinsey analysts don't think there will be a radical adoption of EVs. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all those stories at autonews.com. Infiniti is hitting the reset button on its first high-performance QX80. The luxury brand has delayed the red sport by more than a year after deciding the original plan didn't go far enough to compete with rivals like Mercedes-AMG and BMW M. Now Infiniti is expanding the project with upgraded suspension, stronger brakes, and more aggressive styling. Not just more horsepower. Automotive News reporter Urvash Kakaria joins us now to explain why Infiniti is raising the bar, what it means for the brand's performance ambitions, and when buyers can expect the revamped flagship SUV. Urvash, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Hi, Kel. Good to be back.
So, Urvash, Infiniti originally planned to focus on horsepower, but now it's reworking the QX80 Red Sport into a more complete performance SUV. What prompted that change in strategy, and what does it say about how competitive this segment has become?
Infinity had this grand ambition of sort of stepping into the rarefied ultra performance space, competing with Mercedes AMG, BMW M, and the Cadillac V Series. And long term, they want to sort of develop a halo vehicle with close to 700 horsepower, highly tuned vehicle. But that was the original plan. Then last year they decided that that was going to take some time, and they wanted to come to market quicker. So they came up with the QX80 Red Sport. It was a slightly higher horsepower, about a 20% increase in horsepower, and it was supposed to have some minor aesthetic changes. The car was supposed to arrive in dealerships in December. However, uh, Infinity has sort of looked at the plan and they've realized that, to be really competitive in this space, they're going to have to need something bigger than or deeper than a high horsepower car, which was the QX80 Red Sport. So they've kind of gone back to the drawing board. The horsepower will not change. It'll still be around 600 horsepower. However, there'll be significant suspension upgrades. They'll change the driving dynamics, the braking. It's expected to have a active exhaust system, which can be controlled to make it louder or quieter. It's also going to, have larger brake calipers. So all this is going to take some time to re-engineer this. This car is being developed by Nismo. So Infinity is now, they haven't said exactly when it's expected to arrive, but I'm told that it will come in the first half of 2028, and it will be timed with the refresh of the QX80.
Now, how important is the success of the QX80 Red Sport to Infinity's broader efforts to strengthen its luxury brand?
Yeah, so I mean, the QX80 is important because it is sort of the first effort at this performance brand. But more broadly speaking, Infinity is seeing what their competitor Genesis is doing in this space with their high performance venture, and they've realized that they've got to go more upmarket. They've got to attract higher net worth individuals, and one way of doing that is showing their technology. And the easiest way to show that technology, or sort of the most impactful way to show their technology chops, is through a Halo high performance vehicle. Coming back to the reason why Infinity is also taking another look at the QX80 Red Sport is because they've realized that just a horsepower upgrade is not going to be able to justify, it's not going to be enough to justify, the six-figure sticker price that they plan to charge for the QX80 Red Sport. I understand that this model could start anywhere between 130,000 and could go up to 145,000 dollars. So that's a big chunk of change, and Infinity has to deliver sufficient value if it hopes for this to be a sort of a somewhat of a commercial success. Again, it's not going to be a high volume vehicle. They're anticipating anywhere between 600 to 900 units of sales a year.
Urvash, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Volkswagen Group is negotiating the best way to restore profitability and what job cuts and factory closures are necessary. It currently plans to slash product complexity by as much as 75% and cut its global model lineup around 50% by 2030. Peter Sigal is a reporter from our sibling publication, Automotive News Europe. He sat down with our own Jake Neer. Here's that conversation.
Peter Sigal, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Thanks, Jake. Great to be here.
Okay, so VW's supervisory board voted down management's restructuring proposal 12-7. How unusual is that, and what does it actually mean for the plan going forward?
It's pretty unusual, although not unheard of. The supervisory board has competing factions. They have obviously the company's executive management, major shareholders such as the Porsche and Piech family, and then you have labor representatives. So there are times when those interests do not align neatly, and this was clearly one of them.
So Oliver Blume is reportedly pushing to close 4 German plants and cut up to 100,000 jobs. We've been talking about that for a little while here on the show. That's roughly double what's been on the table. What's driving that gap between what management wants and what the board will actually accept?
Well, I mean, partially when you say what the board will accept, we're talking about major job cuts in Germany, potentially the closing of factories. the state of Lower Saxony, Germany, is a major Volkswagen shareholder. So job cuts, straight job cuts, and straight factory closures were always going to be a tough sell. It may be the necessary medicine that Volkswagen needs to swallow, but I think the feeling is that if there are any other avenues to explore, and this is not from management's perspective, but from some of the other stakeholders, we should try everything else before we resort. Because, as you know, once you close an automotive factory, it's not opening again. So those jobs will be gone. They could go elsewhere, or they'll just be gone.
And the other one of the other points of contention here is the level of specifics that are in the plan. I mean, we have analysts from Bloomberg Intelligence and Bernstein both saying that this is a pretty nebulous plan. That's sort of a paraphrase of what they say. But why announce something this consequential without firmer details in the plan?
Right. Well, I think the management had hoped that they would be able to announce something more concrete. The board met yesterday evening into last night. They came up with what they call a future plan, which is not the most exciting title, but really it's only a 3-page press release. Oliver Blume, the CEO, came on, did a video announcing what he'd like to do, which is basically trim the number of models by half. Apparently, Volkswagen Group has about 150 models over its various brands, and also reduce diversity, which is basically the number of options within a model. And then some other things like streamline technology and sort of group all the Eastern technology and the Western technology and things like that. But there were no specifics, and except that they would start calling the models as soon as possible. But other than that, there were no specifics, and it's really not enough for analysts to kind of wrap their head around and make a recommendation as to hold the stock, buy the stock, sell the stock. So they were disappointed. They expected more because there's been a buildup to this. There's been leaks, the usual sort of anticipation before a major meeting involving Europe's biggest automaker and the second largest in the world after Toyota. So
there does seem to be this theme of this tension building here when related to time. I mean, you already mentioned they had to get something out, even if they didn't have all the details. Analysts are sort of trying to figure out what to do with any of this. The management does feel some pressure to act. And I'm curious, USB's Patrick Hummel, who you spoke with, said that VW's chance of getting ahead of Chinese competitions, the Chinese competition wave, is very slim. Do you agree? How much time does VW realistically have? And is that what's causing some of that tension here?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it and say they have no time because Volkswagen Group's business is essentially broken up into two parts. The business they do in China, which they're probably the largest profit pool or largest individual country market, of course. And they have brands like Porsche, and Audi that sell, higher end models there. And then, of course, there's their European business and then the rest of the world. But for the sake of argument, let's exclude the rest of the world and just talk about Europe and China. Their sales in China were down, I believe, 28% in the second quarter. At the same time, in Europe, their sales held up. But what's happening in Europe is that the Chinese are coming in. There's a cutthroat price war in China. And Chinese companies are desperate to find profits, and they're looking to Europe. And they're coming into the European market, and they're undercutting the legacy automakers' prices, and with the same features and all that sort of thing. More car for less money, all the stuff that consumers who aren't so obsessive about this as we are, they see a bigger car with modern features and less money, and they'll buy it. And Chinese automakers now have a 10% share of the European market. That's up from 4 or 5% a year ago. And the trend is not showing any signs of slowing down. At the same time, the European market is down by about 2.5 million units pre-COVID. So Volkswagen's slice of the pie is not going to get bigger. It's only got one way to go. It will probably take them 10 years to close. If they need to close factories, it will take them 10 years. 10 years from now, Chinese automakers will have factories running in Europe to avoid tariffs, and they'll probably have a larger share of the European market.
Now, tell me a little bit about IG Metall and the Works Council's sort of role in all of this? I know workers were out in force on July 9th. There have been demonstrations across sites. How much leverage does the union actually have here?
They have a lot in Germany, probably more than any other industrialized country, because of the process known as co-determination, where basically large strategic decisions can't be made in big companies without buy-in from union representatives who sit on the board of directors. So, you don't really have that. I believe that was one of the issues in Volkswagen U.S. Unionizing there. Were they going to have a seat on a board in Chattanooga? Would they be able to participate in decisions the way they can in Germany? So, yes, E.G. Metall and some of the other big unions have incredible leverage. I mean, they have to be. Their buy-in is essential for any strategic decision.
All right, and finally, Peter, I have to wonder also, at what point does this stop being a restructuring story for just VW and become something more serious for the broader European auto industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually almost at that point right now, especially with looking at Germany. You can just sort of discount some of the other European brands that are more, that aren't a little bit less global. But Volkswagen Group, BMW, and Mercedes, they're facing the same pressures, the pressure within China, where a lot of them hitched their wagons to a decade and a half ago, and then the pressures within Europe. They're also facing tariffs from the United States, which has been an incredibly lucrative market for them. So they're all sort of facing the same kind of challenges. BMW came out with a fairly surprising profit warning a couple of weeks ago. Mercedes's profits are down. They're basically going to have to figure out a way to go forward as smaller companies. And so, just to promote some of our work, my colleague William Boston has written a really nice analysis piece on how the Volkswagen decision fits into the challenges facing the German auto sector. So keep an eye out for that, please.
Peter Sigal, really appreciate you joining us from across the pond. Thank you so much for all your insights today on Volkswagen and the European market.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it.
That's Daily Drive for today. Thanks to our own Hans Greimel, Lawrence Iliff, and Peter Sigal for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on Volkswagen, Toyota, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back tomorrow for a conversation with Eric Ledoux, Vice President of Infinity's America.
We have seen, matter of fact, even the first full month of sales, which is the month of June, exceeded our own internal expectations.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoyed the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.